Good morning. Today we continue in our book, Disciplines of a Godly Man by R. Kent Hughes. I'm so thankful that you have given up some of your time to read this book with me. I think that as we progress through this book, the chapters will get more and more challenging, which is a good thing. And I pray that you'll stick with it. I pray that you'll walk through this book with me and grow with me as we continue to consider the good thoughts of how to live a disciplined and godly life. At the end of chapter 1, there was some discussion questions, some questions for us to think about. I've decided that at the end of this YouTube video, I'm going to post those questions, perhaps down in the description underneath the video. And if that doesn't work, I'll make sure I get it up on Facebook for those guys who follow me on Facebook. But today we're going to be talking about relationships, and this is the beginning of chapter 2, in which he entitles Discipline of Purity. So let's begin. He writes, "One need turn on the television for only a few minutes to feel the heat of the oppressive sensuality of our day. Most of the oppression is crude. A boring trip around the TV channels at midday invariably reveals at least one couple wrapped in bed sheets and much sensual monotony. But the heat has become increasingly artful, especially if its purpose is to sell. The camera focuses close up in black and white on an intense, lusting male face over which is superimposed an amber flame, which then becomes a glowing bottle of Calvin Klein's Obsession as the face intones on its desire. Newer spots feature subtle cinematic images with prose from D.H. Lawrence, to know him, to gather him in, ... and Flaubert's Madame Bovary as she wanders around her illicit lover's bedroom. The sticky steam of sensuality penetrates everything in our world. But even with all this, many sensualists want more. Professor David A.J. Richard of New York University Law School, who advocates freedom for hardcore pornography, argues that pornography can be seen as the unique medium of sexuality, a pornotopia, a view of sensual delight in the erotic celebration of the body, a concept of easy freedom without consequences, a fantasy of timeless, repetitive indulgence. Pornotopia? Now there's a word. It sounds like a new section of Disneyland. Autotopia, Pornotopia, Fantasyland. Absurd, we think, and it is. But sadly, Richard's arguments are actually been given serious weight today. It's no wonder we live in a culture that sweats sensuality from its pores. And the church has not escaped, for many in today's church have wilted underneath the heat. Recently, Leadership Magazine commissioned a poll of 1,000 pastors. The pastors indicated that 12% of them had committed adultery while in the ministry, 1 out of 8 pastors. And 23% had done something they considered sexually inappropriate. Christianity Today surveyed 1,000 of its subscribers who were not pastors and found the figure to be nearly double, with 23% saying that they had extramarital intercourse and 45% indicating that they had done something they themselves deemed sexually inappropriate. 1 in 4 Christian men are unfaithful, and nearly 1/2 have behaved unbecomingly. Shocking statistics, especially when we remember that Christianity Today readers tend to be college-educated church leaders, elders, deacons, Sunday school superintendents, and teachers. If this is so far for the church leadership, how much more for the average member of the congregation? Only God knows. This leads us to an inescapable conclusion. The contemporary evangelical church, broadly considered, is Corinthian to the core. It is being stewed in the molten juices of its own sensuality, so that it is no wonder the church has lost its grip on holiness. No wonder it is slow to discipline its members. No wonder it is dismissed by the world as irrelevant. No wonder so many of its children reject it. And no wonder it has lost its power in many places, and that Islam and other false religions are making so many converts. Sensuality is easily the biggest obstacle to godliness among men today, and is wreaking havoc in the church. Godliness and sensuality are mutually exclusive, and those in the grasp of sensuality can never rise to godliness while in its sweaty grip. If we are to discipline ourselves for the purpose of godliness, as 1 Timothy 4:7 states, we must begin with the discipline of purity. There has to be some holy heat, some holy sweat. The author here referenced the Corinthian church. I wanted to give you a passage from 1 Corinthians as we consider the Bible this morning. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and I want to begin in verse 1. This is the title. There's a title over this chapter that is talking about marriage, divorce, and singleness. And if you were to look back in chapter 5, you would also see a really large rebuke from the Apostle Paul in regards to the behavior of that church. And if you have time, feel free to read 1 Corinthians chapter 5. But this morning I want to just read the first 10 verses or so of 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Again, under marriage, divorce, and singleness. Verse 1 from the New Living Translation says this: "Now regarding the question that you asked in your letter, yes, it is good to abstain from sexual relations. But because there is so much sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman should have her own husband. The husband should fulfill his wife's sexual needs, and the wife should fulfill her husband's needs. The wife gives authority over her body to the husband, and the husband gives authority over his body to his wife. Do not deprive each other of sexual relations, unless you both agree to refrain from sexual intimacy for a limited time so that you can give yourselves more completely to prayer. Afterward, you should come together again, so that Satan won't be able to tempt you because of your lack of self-control. I say this as a concession, not as a command, but I wish everyone were single just as I am. Yet each person has a special gift from God of one kind or another. So I say to those who aren't married and to the widows, it's better to stay unmarried, just as I am. But if they can't control themselves, they should go ahead and marry. It's better to marry than to burn with lust." Let me give you a food for thought. The contemporary evangelical church, broadly considered, is Corinthian to the core. It is being stewed in the molten juices of its own sensuality, according to the author. Do you agree or disagree? Do you agree or disagree that the church, broadly considered, is Corinthian to the core? It is being stewed in the molten juices of its own sensuality. Do you agree or disagree? How about concerning your own church? How about considering your own personal life? At this moment of lust, God loses all reality. Satan does not fill us with hatred of God, but with forgetfulness of God. Have you found this true in your own battles with temptation? What is the most effective way to prevent moral lapses? Pray that you think about those questions. And again, thank you so much for being with me this morning. Pray that you continue to follow along and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can get devotions every day. Thanks, guys. God bless.